everyone, welcome to the masterclass on how the actual torso of a jacket should fit on a custom fit. So what we want to see here is we want this to see this lay really nice and clean on our client with the minimal amount of big, kind of creases or anything like that across the front. There's two things that really help us with this that I'm going to review. One is the canvassing, no crazy review there. We just know the canvassing builds a beautiful structure in here and breaks down really beautifully to work with our client's proportions. And two has to do with the actual kind of measurements and the fit of them and the proportion of the construction of the jacket. So for the construction of the jacket, as I mentioned in the overview video, we want the chest, stomach, and seat to be nice and form-fitting, not too tight, not too loose. And it's really important we keep our client within those guardrails. Some people really like to bring it in nice and tight in the actual torso, but that causes a lot of problems. It can be buckling lapels, anything like that, or even sensitive lapels to buckling. But when it's nice and form-fitting, as we see it laying beautifully on this mannequin, what we get is a clean hourglass silhouette. And that's something that is kind of the most important thing to think about when you're looking over the actual fit of your client is what does the hourglass of the silhouette look like? If it's nice and form-fitting to the actual chest, stomach, and seat, then it should create that nice hourglass silhouette, assuming they have more of a standard figure or more of a common figure that we see in our clients. Two other figures I want to go through. First is someone with a fuller or more weight on them, and they don't necessarily have the proportions of, wider, narrower, wider, but it's more so wide throughout because of the weight. That's something that you want to cut and have it nice and kind of draping more straight down. Sure, if there's a little bit of a pinch of an hourglass silhouette in the actual stomach, if that's doable, totally fine. But what's important with someone with more weight on them and a client who has a fuller figure, that's something you don't want to pull it in. You don't want to try to manipulate and create that hourglass silhouette. Even if you can almost feel that there's a little extra room there, keep it more on a full cut that goes more straight down rather than trying to be an hourglass, because that plays incredibly well to their proportions and their figure. If you try to pull it in, someone with a fuller build and weight on their figure, that is something that it looks like they're trying too hard when you actually pull it in. It looks like they're trying to be too much like someone who has a slimmer build to them. Think of someone who shouldn't be wearing narrow skinny jeans who do try to wear narrow skinny jeans. That's a great analogy for this. Now, the second figure is someone, think of someone like Nathan Sim or Michael Phelps, who have more of a bigger upper body, or a swimmer's body as it's referred to sometimes. And that body is very, very wide and kind of big and pronounced at the chest and very narrow at the actual stomach and waist. Now, that's something that you don't want to be very, very strict on how tight it is throughout, because as long as it's nice and form-fitting up here, and then it should absolutely have that hourglass silhouette on someone with that swimmer's body build, but it should not be pulled in too tight in the actual stomach. The reason for that is because if you pull it in way too tight here, even if it still is within that form-fitting guardrails there of not too tight, not too loose, it makes their chest look incredibly bigger. And overall, for just a general humanity, it looks very off balance when you have such a disproportion between the upper body and the lower body. When you have something that's so slim down here, something that's so big up here, and then on top of it visually looks even bigger up here. So with that swimmer's body, don't need to go too drastic in the actual hourglass here. It can be a little bit of a fuller cut through the actual torso for someone with more weight and build on them. That is something that you want more of a straight down cut to flatter their proportions and make them look in a more comfortable silhouette. Now the secondary measurements that do affect the actual torso a bit, a lot of things can affect it, like if the back shoulder's off or anything like that. But the two that are most closely secondary of measurements that help out is the actual vertical posture, and that's from our shoulder to waist and nape to waist measurements, something we're learning more of and being taught more of in the company. That those two measurements create a vertical posture of how either forward or back the balance of the jacket is. And that can affect kind of like how the actual balance is between the front and back lengths here. And so that in turn can affect how the actual chest, stomach, and seat sit on those parts of the body. Then the next is the waist button position. It's really important that the actual focal point here comes in really nicely. Again, remember the waist button is like the fulcrum of an actual seesaw. It's very, very important that we get this balance right on here. That doesn't mean that it's perfectly in the middle like a seesaw. It just means that we want it sitting right where it's supposed to be, because that causes a beautiful proportional balance for the jacket and allows this great form-fitting chest, stomach, and seat to do its job while this comes in and buttons right correctly at the correct spot. If not, if this is way too high, you can see that starts to push up the lapels and affect the actual chest up here. So we want the actual vertical posture and the waist button position, which is determined by the length of the jacket, to be correct. Let's see, anything else here? Now, I think one of the biggest things with our fits that we need to visually look out for is to make sure the actual seat of the jacket is correct. I know it's very, very easy for us to actually look over and know that the chest and stomach is, nice and form-fitting. That's something that a client calls out a lot, something that we look over, but something that we don't look over as much that we need to concentrate on is the actual seat of the jacket. We don't want it to flare out at all, no matter how drastic or little, like a pair of bell-bottom jeans at the bottom. We want it. We also don't want it to pull too tight, because then that causes it to flare out as well, because our torso at the seat and our butt will push it out. So make sure it's nice and form-fitting through the seat. It drapes down really beautifully, but doesn't have this kind of like extra inch or two of fabric around the actual seat. You can pin up the actual vents and pin them in if you actually need to alter that and adjust it. Go over into the alteration guide. The alteration guide will teach you how to actually pin up the actual side seams in the back. So last thing I want to review is how do we actually address this if we ever want to address it. So I'm dipping a little bit in the alteration guide here, but it's a really important foundational point. When we look at our back of the jacket, when we actually want to affect the torso in the front, and we wanted to correct it, either loosen it up or bring it in, to bring it into that form-fitting fit, our side seams here are for shape. Side seams are for shape. They actually create and help manipulate that shape, whether it's in or out, that we just discussed throughout this video. The actual center seam here is for cleaning, and that means it cleans up anything in the actual back panel. The two are very, very different from each other. Side seams for shape, center seam for actual cleanup of the back, whether it's too loose or too tight across the back panel. If I were to just pinch the center seam, which I'm doing pretty aggressively right now, that doesn't really affect the shape at all. But when I actually bring in the side seams, that starts to really affect the shape. So know that's an important distinction between the two. Whenever you're actually just fully altering the garment and pinning it up, or it's a really good tip to use when you're looking over the fit and you're just kind of maybe pinching the fabric and looking at it in the mirror with your client to see whether or not it needs to be brought in or let out for a more standard figure, a swimmer's body figure, or that fuller cut that we need for clients of ours who have more weight on their build. Guys, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to send any photos to me of previous fits of anyone in any build when it comes to the actual stomach. You don't understand, like, you know, why it's like breaking down in the front, even though it's not too tight or anything like that. I'm really happy to talk through which measurements could be affecting that for the actual fit there. A last point here is for an unconstructed jacket, something that I'm hoping that will really start to hone in. Louis will design really well and put in great recommendations and products into KSM, is an unconstructed jacket, especially with a fabric that complements it, should be a little wrinkly through the body. So, you know, always concentrate on just nice and form-fitting, not necessarily if there's a wrinkle or two when it comes to an unconstructed jacket. Reach out to me if you have any questions, guys. Happy to go through previous fits and talk over any point here that you want more explanation on or anything beyond that. Enjoy, and I really hope this helps your fits and the actual torso moving forward.